On today's video, we'll be looking at WatchDogs Legion, which is currently available for PS4, Xbox One and PC, as well as next gen when they launch. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe for more videos and more games in the future. Welcome to London, the brand new setting for the Ubisoft Hackermania series, Watch Dogs. WatchDogs Legion is the third installment to the franchise following on from Watch Dogs 2, but if you're totally new to this series, what the hell is Watch Dogs about? Well, let's take a quick trip back to 2014 when the original Watch Dogs was released. Fresh off the heels of perfecting their own open-world collectathon formula with titles such as Assassin's Creed and Far Cry, Ubisoft was keen to apply that formula to something more modern. With the two aforementioned games often taking place in historical or tropical settings, Watch Dogs will be a chance for Ubisoft to flex their world-building muscles by recreating real-life cities set in modern times.
A massive storm front moves over Chicago tonight. This evening, showers are expected to give way to...
The first Watch Dogs game was set in Chicago and followed the story of Aiden Pierce, a man with such angst and little character, you wouldn't be surprised that I had to Google his name before putting it in this review. Aiden's character seems to have an unnatural ability to hack into the world around him, using nothing but his jailbroken smartphone. Your playable character is able to hack into the likes of traffic lights to control traffic flow or help you with a getaway, unlock doors that help you sneak into restricted areas, and even hack into pedestrians' phones to see their thoughts or who they've been texting behind their partners' backs.
Joe, it's your guy. He's here. He's at your show.
Your character does all this hacking with the aid and support of basically an internet organisation named DedSec. Imagine our own internet sleuth group Anonymous, however DedSec have the will and somehow the knowledge to make some kind of impact on the social matters that they raise. Anyway, back to Aiden's story. Actually, forget that, because I don't even remember the story of the first Watch Dogs. Maybe some Liam Neeson's daughter kidnapped story that we've all seen time and time again? Oh, and did I mention that Aiden was also a keen sharpshooter? Yeah, not sure where or how he developed that skill, but he's really handy with a gun. That's right, the first Watch Dogs was a little underwhelming, if not the dull setting then certainly the half-baked gameplay and forgettable story from the moment that you heard it. This wasn't the biggest upset when it came to 2014's Watch Dogs. Remember that push for the industry to be more transparent with trailers? This game was guilty as charged. Watch Dogs was the big new title that everyone was excited for, as at the time the PS4 and Xbox One had just launched. It was released on both generations as most multi-platform games do around the launch of new systems. However, none of those game versions looked like the trailers. There was such an uproar around this new trend that we quickly saw developers include terms like not actual gameplay or made using in-game engine for trailers and announcements moving forward. That being said, there was a lot of fun to be had with the original Watch Dogs. Think of it as a watered down version of Grand Theft Auto, and through the cracks you could see the franchise's potential.
Is this suicide?
Not that we expected this franchise to continue after this rocky introduction. So there was some surprise in 2016 when Ubisoft dropped the sequel, Watch Dogs 2, into the wild. And what a delightful surprise it was.
Ah, the San Francisco Bay.
Changing the setting from a grey-scaled Chicago for the bright lights of San Francisco and the hipster-fueled Silicon Valley. Watch Dogs 2 was a breath of fresh air. There were colours and character. It was incredibly fun and it didn't take itself too seriously, something the first one suffered from to an overwhelming degree.
This weirdo's wrench, and this is Horatio.
It's the crew, huh?
This time you played as a young black American by the name of Marcus Holloway. Marcus and his techie-inclined friends became sick of their city being ruled by the tech giants that were born and based in Silicon Valley, as perhaps an ode to our own tech giants, Google, Facebook, Twitter and the likes. The story was genuinely amusing, riffing on the hipster trend that was so commonly found in the area at the time. Man buns everywhere, geometric designs and over-branded coffee shops were the normal in this in-game rendition of San Fran.
Rigged elections, weapons programs. spying into people's homes.
As the in-game Google-esque overlords were planning to turn the city into a surveillance state, every move being monitored and used against the citizens of the Bay Area, Marcus and his eclectic friends said enough is enough, and team up with those pesky hackers over at DedSec to bring the big bad man bun-toting hipsters down. Once again, with hacking as a main gameplay feature, you could control even more of the city's infrastructure in the Bay Area, introducing the likes of drones and remote control spider bots for players to sneak into enemies' HQ, taking pictures of incriminating evidence, or upgrade your arsenal to apply non-lethal tactics to show the world what their beloved social media overlords were actually up to. The whole non-lethal approach was a new one for the series. Whereas the first game gave you guns and told you to go wild in recreating scenes from a John Wick flick, Watch Dogs 2 gave you a choice. Here's a gun, and here's the morals of the DedSec group. One lethal, one not. It was this choice that made me fall in love with the game, its concept and everything that Watch Dogs was about. And all of a sudden, it made sense to me. Imagine if our own anonymous group actually did something in the real world. It wouldn't be to murder people, but rather act like some kind of Robin Hood of the information era, stealing data back from the rich and returning it to the poor.
Guess what? The people, they don't care how it works, only that it does.
The whole casting of characters were a joy to be around, and even those man-bun-toting oppressors that were labelled as the game's main enemy instilled humorous moments and perfect levels of fear and suspense at the right times in the story. This happy-go-lucky, colour-fueled and frankly satire look on the world was just the perfect fit for the Watch Dogs universe. Watch Dogs 2 was one of the best games of 2016 that you didn't play. So, 4 years later, the real world has changed quite a bit. International relations have broken down, the world's leaders look like they're about to star in a new horrific kids cartoon from hell, and a global pandemic has recreated its own version of Around the World in 80 Days a few times over. So with that in mind, we come to the latest expedition into Ubisoft's hacking series, WatchDogs Legion. Again, we are due a change of scenery, and this time we're going over the pond to the near future rendition of the English capital, London. The game starts with players assuming control over some ex-MI5 James Bond type character. He's working alongside our trusty hacker friends at DedSec to foil plans that include blowing up Parliament. Plans put in place by some unknown entity, and without spoiling the first hour or so too much, some of these dreaded plans still go ahead despite your best efforts to prevent them, and with multiple bombings across London, it was our friends at DedSec that were wrongly accused. With that, the government locks London down and employs a shady private military group known as Albion to annex the city and purge the streets of anything that even smelt like DedSec. A few months later, DedSec rises again, underground and looking to expose the truth. However, as public enemy number one, they're going to have to start a rebellion to get the common Londoners on side to see the truth. This is where the player comes in. It's going to be your job, in between stealing data from the rich and returning to the poor, to recruit people for this rebellion. One of the big selling points of Watch Dogs Legion is that almost any common folk can be recruited for your own gain. And by recruited, I actually mean you can play as almost any of the citizens you see walking around in London town.
Feast your eyes, London!
Just as with previous Watch Dogs, think of this game as GTA but with a slightly different direction. Or if you are familiar with Ubisoft's open world games, then expect no different here. A lot of your time will be spent looking through the lens of CCTV cameras or navigating your trusted tech such as drones and spider bots through restricted areas, downloading data from tablets or computers that will help you build up your rebellion. Using similar technology as the previous games, you can hack your way into people's phones, cars, computers, CCTV cams, and much, much more. This open-world collectathon is full of things to do outside of your startup rebellion mission. I actually enjoyed some of the tweaks that they made here to make these activities feel more local. There's a football minigame I got hooked on for a couple of hours or so. You can go on a pub crawl by having a pint in every pub that you see. And of course, most of London's real-world attractions are there for you to actually explore, such as seeing the sights from the London Eye. As mentioned earlier, you can recruit anyone in London, and each person has their own set of attributes. recruit a construction worker to freely walk around restricted construction sites, or hire a nurse to get better benefits towards health. Hell, even recruit a lawyer to bring down the prison sentence of any other recruits that may have been arrested in previous missions. This brings its own layer of strategy to the game that, at first glance, seems like you'll have to stop and think about your approach before each mission.
How's late-stage capitalism working for you? We need jobs, you knobs!
There are a lot of positives here in WatchDogs Legion. The gameplay remains fairly unchanged from its predecessor, which means I will happily ponder around and hack in and cruise my way through the city, grinding to earn myself that platinum trophy. I still enjoy the style too, but rather than the humming bright lights of San Francisco, this time we have the bright lights blended with the dark and atmospheric tone of the events unfolding in-game, to create more of a neon gothic visual style across the city.
You can recruit anyone. An army.
The whole recruit anyone concept is a real nice idea. Further to this, with such a selection of people, different jobs, attributes and loadouts, you'll find that citizens actually have an in-game schedule. Sure, we've seen NPCs have schedules before, that's nothing new, but upon inspecting someone and seeing their current activities having a drink with Uncle until 4 o'clock, and seeing them have a drink with said person until the hour until their schedule changes, is actually a nice touch that fills out the world with more believable characters. It is a joy to see London represented like this in a video game. We very rarely see big games choose England for a setting. In fact, the last time I can remember was another Ubisoft game, Assassin's Creed Syndicate. However, that was based in the 1800s. We've also had GTA 2 over 20 years ago now, which probably doesn't hold much relevance nowadays. Ubisoft's eye for detail when building these worlds is nothing short of incredible. The architecture is so absurdly accurate, it requires recognition all on its own.
You lot certainly know how to pick your targets. You do know that Albion have set up their headquarters in there, right?
Trust me, we wouldn't be doing this if there was an alternative. But we have to find out what new project Cass is unveiling at this meeting. There's no other choice.
That 12-year-old Ubi formula. We have all known for a while now that Ubisoft has really milked their open world formula, having no less than 3 separate franchises follow a very similar gameplay mechanics. We saw them take a break from Assassin's Creed a couple of years ago to deal with that exact issue. However, no grand changes have come in for the likes of Far Cry or the game in question, Watch Dogs. Let's hope that Ubisoft put this open world collectathon formula into the trophy cabinet sooner rather than later. Britain's grey skies. As much as I love the in-game London, there's something rather grey about it all. Maybe it's the above mentioned points, or maybe it's the British Isles' natural weather that paints the grey sky over most of the island. Now, of course, this isn't exactly Ubisoft's fault. I can't blame them for our dreary weather patterns, but perhaps they could have helped combat this by having some shorter nights in-game to bring some more blue skies where possible. And plus, why is it always raining in-game? Bad accents in 2020. The last point for possible improvements I want to mention is something of a pet peeve. Something I already knew that would bother me from watching the very first trailer for this game. The accents. That's not to say I don't like the natural accent, I just feel like Ubisoft wanted more of a caricature of the London Cockney accent. I can only determine that this is the way that Ubisoft intended. At the end of the day, Ubi is only located on the other side of the channel in France, so must know that this isn't how most of London, if any, actually sounds. There's one voiceover in particular in-game that 4 of my operatives currently share. That just isn't good enough for a AAA game in 2020.
Brilliant. Let's rock.
I feel like there's a slight shift in tone here from its predecessor. I feel like the topics perhaps mirror real-world events that currently plague many cities across England feel all a bit too real. The in-game version of the capital is full of social issues, huge homeless populations, struggling food banks, clear divides between power and people. Once again, I feel like WatchDogs Legion is trying to take itself somewhat seriously here, and that doesn't really lend itself to the gameplay. There's a discussion to be had here. Where the move to Watch Dogs 2 was a welcome one, I feel like WatchDogs Legion is a sidestep in the wrong direction. I hope moving forward Ubisoft takes it back to the satire and injects a bit more light into its setting. That's not to say I think this game is bad. WatchDogs Legion is an incredibly fun open world game in a scarily accurate digital London. I will happily throw 40 hours at this title, as I believe many of you will too. So to answer the question, should I be playing WatchDogs Legion? As long as the classic Ubisoft formula doesn't put you off, and you love the idea of panic on the streets of London, and I'll see you in Camden.